Elden Ring Shadow the Erdtree tries its very best to implant the idea that Bayle the Black Dread is in fact one of the most vile and horrendous and horrific creatures to have ever lived inside Elden Ring's universe. But in today's video, I want to take a different approach to this, and I want to discuss the truth about Bayle the Dread. Not to mention some very interesting secrets that, to my knowledge, have not been discussed yet. Before we get any further into the video, I'm not going to ask you to subscribe right now, as I think that's a bit silly, but if at the end of the video you have enjoyed, please consider leaving a like and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel. On the other hand, if you don't like the video, please drop a dislike. Without any more dilly-daddling, please sit back, relax, grab some succulent, juicy, tender, sensational and juicy prawns if you want, and enjoy as we delve into Bayle the Dread. I'm going to give you 10 seconds, and I'm going to ask you, who do you think out of Placidusax and Bayle the Dread, which one is good and which one is bad? Which one is innocent, which one is just a piece of shit? Have you got your answers? If you picked Placidusax as the good guy, then you're wrong. Placidusax is not as innocent as the game would have you believe. There is actually a lot of crimes he commits, and if Elden Ring was in our world, he would have broken the Geneva Convention multiple times. He is a war criminal and definitely not a good guy. In fact, I believe he is the antagonist, and I believe he is evil. And hopefully by the end of this video you'll understand why as well. The first heavily overlooked point of view is the fact that everything to do with Bayle is from a biased point of view. The best example being Florisax, who was an ancient dragon before she abandoned her crusty ass flesh and decided to take on a mortal body to aid in the destruction of Bayle the Dread. And yet, if Bayle the Dread was evil, that would be completely fine. She can go do her own thing and we can just scurry off and help kill Bayle. But it's not as simple as that, and it never seems to be with an Elden Ring. Florisax also tells us that Bayle is the ancestor to all drakes. They all can trace their lineage back to him. And yet these drakes who have had no involvement in Bayle's war, no involvement in Farum Azula and its affairs, are slaughtered and hunted by drake warriors. Their chests are caved open, their hearts ripped out, before being consumed to commune and become closer to dragons. To me, the fact they are all compliant in slaughtering and committing mass genocide on innocent dragons suggests to me they don't have pure intentions, and at the very least their moral compass is very, very skewed, and they're obviously very, very biased towards themselves. Bayle looks different compared to the other ancient dragons of his time. This was pointed out not too long ago by a very interesting video. Bayle the Dread looks like an omen. He has horns protruding from his face. In a similar fashion, there's these horn-like things that protrude out of his back. Perhaps this is why he was treated so harshly. Perhaps the reason why he struck against his lord was years and years of torment for being different. We know how the omens and the crucible were treated in the lands between. The only reason that occurred though was because it was so different to what the lands between had at that very instant. The same thing would have occurred with the ancient dragons. Bayle was completely different and most likely would have become an outcast. And so when he would strike against his lord, of course the history books would paint him as the villain. But even the accusation that he struck first is not as concrete. A lot of people have took it as such, and yet the confirmation we get about the striking first comes from a talisman and a dragon priestess who is biased towards Placidusax. We can rule the goofy goober that is Florisax out due to her being biased, but what about the talisman? It depicts the dread dragon of the jagged peak, whose roars cause the peak's molten fury to boil and churn. Roars, or perhaps cries of pain, for his wings are torn and he's missing even a leg. What I find really interesting is the knowledge that this talisman holds. We find it in a shack randomly in the Land of Shadows, looking upon the jagged peak, as a phantom talks about Bayle. And fittingly, the talisman also talks about this fated battle with Bayle the Dread and Placidusax. And although this specific phantom seems to quite like Bayle and talks about him in the same sense that people talk about the frenzied flame, he is not the only person to have more knowledge than they should do about Bayle in the Lands of Shadow. Another example being Egon, who is another Drake warrior. These people possess knowledge that they should not know, unless perhaps a certain priestess whispered in the ears of those in the Lands of Shadows and twisted the tale of what occurred eons prior. This convincing of the people also wouldn't have been that hard, considering Bayle's roars of perhaps pain caused the peak's molten fury to boil and churn. This probably would have led to untold destruction, and so when some dragon priestess comes singing the tale of the vile Bayle, of course they're going to flock to this tale and rally behind a common enemy, even if that common enemy has done nothing wrong except for howl in pain at the sky. There's something really ironic about Bayle and his drakes. Even though Bayle looks so different and his descendants are called drakes instead of dragons, they still drop dragon hearts. No matter the scorn, no matter the hatred, no matter how much the ancient dragons and the dragons like to paint the drakes as being so different, at their core they are exactly the same. Now you might be thinking, wow Gecko, that's a really interesting story. It can't get any more insane, can it? Well, you'd be bloody wrong, because for the next part of the video I'm going to jump back in time to 1665, grab a little injection of the Black Death, stab it into your veins, overthrow the crown, become Lord Protector of the realm, and then I'm going to become an immortal vampire, and then when it's the 21st century, I'm going to make it so From Software has to put in that Bayle is a good guy. Most people have seen this lady dragon, mostly due to the fact she drops 75,000 runes and can be accessed very easily after starting a new game. But she is also known as Grail, the mother of dragons, the mother of all dragons. The interesting part being, she looks like a drake. She has 2 legs, 2 wings, very different to what we know of the ancient dragons. She's the mother of all dragons, so why does she look nothing like the ancient dragons? Well, I believe that once more From Software is taking hints back at the omens. The omens and the Crucible were around a long time before the Elden Ring and the Golden Order, and yet once the Golden Order came about, or in this case the ancient dragons, that old way was scorned and hated, just like how Bayle is scorned and hated, just like his drakes are scorned and hated. I'm not necessarily saying that Grail is in fact a Crucible touched dragon, but I do think it is very important that we talk about the parallels between these 2 different storylines. Now, while it could be 100% that Grail simply did an Athena and made some mind babies, and that is how the dragons came about, I think a more interesting point of view would be the largest dragon in From Software history, which is in the Lands of Shadow, is the mate of Grail. I wouldn't be surprised if this theory has already been talked about, but I genuinely believe this. They are both very large, and although the dragon inside the Lands of Shadow is bigger, it's not so much bigger that they can't be ruled out as being mates. It would also make so much sense. If this dragon was the mate of Grail, then it would only be fitting for it to be slain, for it is a remnant of an old age that can tell the true story of what truly occurred with Bayle and that time period. To add on to this further, is it just me, or is it a little bit suspicious that Florisax is right next to this corpse and has put down this foundation for communion in the area right there, the only communion inside the Lands of Shadow? Maybe the Black Death I injected you with earlier has got into my bloodstream and I'm just going batshit insane. Maybe that is the case, but I really do think there's a point to be made that there is a grand dragon conspiracy afoot, and I am fully convinced. Maybe I'm sniffing the copium, but I would not be surprised if this was the intended storyline. Bayle is a tragic character who stood up for his kind, and the only acknowledgement the history books would give him was for his quote-unquote vile nature. Sadly everyone, that is the end of the video. If you did enjoy the video, please consider leaving a like and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel. The support on the channel has been fucking mental. We reached 10,000 subscribers, and honestly, I'm beyond blown away. For a sort of 10k thing, I've decided to invest in getting Elden Ring PC, so now you can expect fancy ass pants camera mods, which has been all over the video. It's my first time messing around with it. It's a little confusing, but I think I'm getting the hang of it, and I really hope you did enjoy that addition to the video. I'm not going to ramble anymore, so please, don't you dare go hollow, friends, and may you find your worth in the waking world. Goodbye everyone.